Hi everyone, Mike Stuchiner, Master Herbalist here. And yep, my boy Bones ain't quite back into working order yet. He will be back soon. Today I'm actually going to be doing another video about ayahuasca. And the reason why I decided to do this third video about ayahuasca was yesterday, which was October 25th, I believe. The video I put up, I would kind of call it what you might want to call a little bit of a chaotic video. I didn't really feel that there was a lot of organization to it. I was just sort of speaking about the topic, about my ayahuasca experiences, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I'm very pleased with what I have shared with the YouTube followers that I have and anyone else who chooses to watch it. But I thought what I would do today, for those who maybe were looking for something that would be considered more of a controlled chaotic video, would be to talk to you about when I originally put my first video up about ayahuasca. I think it was almost 4 months ago. There were many friends of mine, and there were a few family members of mine and some acquaintances of mine who had asked me quite a few different questions out of just general curiosity. And what I decided to do was, I decided to take the top 2 questions of all their questions that they asked, and I'm going to talk about that in today's video. And then I'm also going to talk to you about, which I think is really going to be a lot of fun, is the idea that I've had the privilege since coming back from my ayahuasca journeys to actually, I don't know how I met these people. We were just in the same place at the same time. Maybe I was in a kava bar or I was in a restaurant, and conversations started between people, and I've actually been pretty fortunate to have met a pretty nice handful of other people here in the US who have done ayahuasca, and they've been very happy to, as I have with them, to share their experiences with me. So I'm going to talk about some of those stories as well. But before we get started on all this, let me give you a little bit of a disclaimer, okay? First off, I am not a doctor. I am not playing a doctor on TV or in this video, and I am not what you would consider to be an authority on ayahuasca. This is simply me discussing my experiences with you and telling you what I learned from someone who studied this plant, who has used these plant medicines, and who wants to just give you quality information about it. Okay? So with that said, check. So the first question that I got that I would say is probably one of the most abundant questions was in regards to preparing for ayahuasca with reading and watching videos. And here was my very clear and precise answer. You can watch every video and documentary on ayahuasca. You can read every book and every article on ayahuasca. And in reality, not a single one of those things will even come close to preparing you for your individual experience, okay? Because every movie you watch or documentary, every book you read, most of them are discussing their specific experiences with ayahuasca or other people's experiences, but it doesn't discuss yours, because only you are the one who can have that amazing and enlightening experience, okay? The reason why in the last video I did, I encouraged you to read Chris Killam's book, The Ayahuasca Test Pilot, is because his is a more practical guide, telling you about things that you'll want to know about, that you should just sort of help you prepare in a more, not necessarily in a mental way, but more in a physical way, and more in an emotional way. And I think that that's really a good idea for everyone to do. But what's really important about his book is that it focuses on the idea that it talks about his experience, but he makes it very profoundly clear that it's his experience. And you know, when you read a lot of different books about it, you're going to read about snakes and flying monkeys and all kinds of wild shit. But I think what's most important to understand is you might experience none of those things. My experiences in ayahuasca, I got no visions at all. Everyone talks about colors and visions and all that other stuff. Mine was very physical. My body was very physically endured in my ceremonies and in my experiences. Mine was very emotional. Mine was, of course, like everyone else, mental, emotional, physical, but there was never any like bright lights, or there was never any graphics or geometrical shapes or anything of that nature. None of that stuff occurred for me. And that's just the reality of how some people are and some people aren't. The reality is that when you read some of these books, you're going to hear about some of these amazing, brilliant, bright colors that came to them, or these patterns, or these messages where words were coming flying at them 50 miles an hour in their face. And that's all great. But the reality is that was their experience. The reason why I don't encourage you to do too much reading and research on it prior, other than the book that I recommended, which, by the way, I have no affiliation with Chris. I make no money on the book. I just think it's a great book. But the reason why I recommend people not do too much reading is because I don't want people to come out of the experience feeling disappointed. Oh, why didn't I see this? Or why didn't I feel this? But I read all these books and these articles that people did this, and people felt this, and this. The one thing I can tell you is, even when it comes to purging, you know, everyone talks about how people throw up, okay? I didn't throw up once. I shit myself 20 times a night, but I didn't throw up once, okay? I also went into fits of laughter, like, you know, when you're laughing so hard that you have trouble breathing. That was my other way of purging. So again, my concern is, if you're going to do this and you want to have the best experiences possible, then I think it's really important to understand that there's nothing carved in stone. There was a guy there who went through, I believe, 5 ceremonies when I was there, and it wasn't until his very last one that he had the most epic experience of his life. The first 4, nothing. Didn't experience a single thing. So, you see, there's a lot of reasons why we experience what we experience, but all of those experiences that we're having or lack of are all coming from within. How blocked are you? How much are you willing to allow yourself to be opened up to the experience? This particular fella who had his struggle being able to feel what he wanted to feel and go through it, the reality is he was a college student, and he was a science major. And unfortunately for him, he had this very reductionist way of thinking. And when he thought that way, he was trying to constantly break things down in his head in this reductionist manner. Well, why am I not feeling it? This chemical transfers to this chemical. And I remember one of the facilitators said, man, you're just too much in your fucking head with this shit. Just let it happen. And the last night, when we woke up the next morning and we had our little powwow talking about the experience, this guy was like bouncing in his seat. He couldn't wait to tell everybody about what an epic experience he had, because he finally just kind of let it go, and he finally accepted the fact that, you know, don't try and control what's happening here, because Mother Ayahuasca is going to beat you every single time. And maybe, in reality, maybe that was his lesson. Maybe the lesson for him, I don't know for sure, because I never really had the discussion beyond that the next morning with him, but maybe the lesson for him was just the idea that Mother Ayahuasca didn't think he was ready to learn his lessons or be open to his lessons, so she didn't show him anything until that last night, when he finally was like, all right, I'm just gonna let this shit go, you know, That's it. So that's why I'm not a fan necessarily of people doing too much reading or too much research prior to going. If you do find a good ayahuasca center like Dream Glades, which is the one I recommend to people, the reality is that they will give you all the information you need to prepare yourself for it. They will help guide you going into this situation and then after your scenario is over. Okay? And I think that's really very important to understand. The other thing is I don't necessarily always suggest people do too much research because I don't want them to necessarily get freaked out by what they may or may not read or what they may watch in a documentary. I remember watching a documentary once where a young guy died, okay, doing ayahuasca. And, I don't specifically think or know for a fact whether it was the ayahuasca that did this or what happened at that particular center. I don't remember what the center's name was. It was so long ago that I watched this documentary, I couldn't even tell you what the name of the documentary is anymore. But the bottom line is that when we watch things, we tend to get these ideas in our head. Well, I saw this, so this is what I have an expectation of. And with ayahuasca, you should go in with zero expectations. All you should do is go in wanting to learn and with an open mind. It really is that simple. It really is. You shit yourself, you clean yourself up, and you get back in the game. It's not that big of a deal, okay? No one's gonna laugh at you and make fun of you because you wanna know something? Everyone around you is crapping themselves and pissing themselves and vomiting into a bucket. So believe me, you have nothing to be ashamed or shy of. All right? Sounds fun, right? Okay, so the next question that was really pretty in my face was referring to themselves when they said, should I do ayahuasca? So here's the deal. That's a hard question to answer because I don't know who you are. I know nothing about you. And like I said, I'm not an authority on ayahuasca. But here's a few things you might want to consider. Number one, if you find a good ayahuasca center, that ayahuasca center will have a great vetting process, hopefully. And if they do, which they should, the reality is that vetting process should give you a feeling of safety and security. If you're accepted within an hour, I'm not saying that it's not a possibility, but generally speaking, when you apply, it can take anywhere from 3 days to up to a week to get accepted because they want to vet you, they want to find out as much about you as possible, and then they want to ask Mother Ayahuasca whether or not this is right for you, okay? So I think that if you end up with an ayahuasca center that turns around in a matter of 20 minutes or an hour and says, oh, you're in, pay your $2,500 for the 10 days you're going to be here, I would question that a little bit, and I would be a little bit leery of that, okay? Because even people who have spectacular health physically may not necessarily be ready for ayahuasca at that time. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's important to understand. So I think first and foremost, if you have a center that's going to have a good vetting process like Dream Glade, I would feel very safe and secure in knowing that you're being well protected and well taken care of, number one, okay? The other thing I think that's important is the intention that you're going in with, okay? If you're just going in to get fucked up and have a good time, you're not going to get anything out of this, okay? You're really not. As a matter of fact, you might have what would be considered a less than optimal experience. You might have some really bad ayahuasca experiences, and it's because it's not a game, and it's not a joke, and it's something that you have to be open-minded to and be willing to face what you need to face. The question I asked all those people that asked me if it's right for them is, are you ready to face your shit? And I'm not just speaking about you shitting yourself. I'm speaking about metaphorically. I'm speaking about your emotions and the mental aspect of facing what you have to face. Are you prepared to do that? Are you ready to do that? It's scary. And in some cases, it can be absolutely terrifying because, as I explained in the previous video, what human nature is, let's push it down, or because we live in a world with all these distractions around us, let us be distracted from those feelings. You know, 6-7 months ago, I guess this was, I was having a conversation with an acquaintance of mine, and this person had said to me, when I asked them, I said, don't you want to talk your shit out? Don't you want to feel what you're supposed to feel and face those things? And his response to me was, no, I don't. And, you know, it doesn't dawn on that person, that's why they're not well. That's why they're physically not well, emotionally not well, mentally not well. That's why they're not well, because they're too afraid and their fear is over-consuming them, you know? And instead of facing that fear and even sitting in that moment of uncomfortableness, it's easier just to push it down. And since I just mentioned the idea of sitting in that moment of uncomfortable feelings, I want to just briefly go off track and talk about the Cambo frog poison medicine, because if you remember from my last video, I talked about the idea that it is about being comfortable in that moment of feeling uncomfortable. Well, a really good friend of mine had made a really valid point to me a while back when we were talking about my anxiety. He said to me that, you know, maybe your anxiety isn't really necessarily a bad thing. Maybe it's just another thing to teach you that instead of always trying to breathe and make yourself get through it as quick as possible, maybe taking a moment and sitting in that and feeling what it is that your anxiety is trying to make you feel is what's going to be good for you. And I attempted that on multiple occasions, and I can tell you that it did make a profound difference to me, okay? Because the reality is that as hard as it was, and as absolutely scary and terrifying as it was, it did have a profound effect on the way I view certain aspects of my life now. So I think it's important to understand that when you're going to do ayahuasca, if you choose to do it, if you believe it's going to be what's right for you, the first thing you have to do is you have to understand that it's about your intention going in. Secondly, I think the other important thing about whether or not it's right for you question has a lot to do with why you're, like, what drew you to ayahuasca? Did you have friends who did it, who told you about their experiences and you said, oh man, that sounds cool? Or is it because you read an article about it, or because you knew people who went and then one day you woke up and you had this overwhelming desire or this overwhelming draw saying, you know, something feels right about this. Something you can't quite explain, but it was a feeling deep inside you that said, you know, something is drawing me to this. If you recall from my other video, I actually spoke about that I learned about ayahuasca more than 10 years prior to me even doing ayahuasca. And as exciting as it was, the things I read, the reality is that never once during that period that I, you know, read books, which is the reason why I'm telling you not to, never once did I have this drawing feeling saying to myself, oh dude, I gotta do this. I wanna do this right away. No, I did it and I enjoyed what I was reading about, but I never once had that feeling. Then one day I just woke up, you know, years and years later, and I was like, wow, you know something? I really feel like this is the right time for me now. I really felt drawn in by ayahuasca. I really felt this overwhelming desire to do it, and I did it. There was zero hesitation for me to do it. I called up that day when I went back to Chris's book. I looked up a bunch of the ayahuasca centers they talked about, and I took the plunge. And the one I picked was, the first one I picked was Dreamglade, and I just called up, or I emailed them rather, and I took the plunge, and that was it. And then 2 months later, I was there. So it's a hard question to answer when someone says to you, should I do it? You know, like I said, what are you trying to achieve? What's your intention? That should be, and most importantly, you know, what's drawing you to ayahuasca? If you can answer those questions with the peace in your heart and a peace of mind, then I see no reason why you can't make the decision of whether or not this is going to be right for you. Okay? Now, the third and final thing I wanted to talk about in this video is some of these experiences that other people have shared with me that I've met in, you know, like I said, I've been in kava bars throughout the country where I just sitting there drinking my kava and start a conversation. What do you know? I'm sitting next to a person who also has done ayahuasca. And it fascinates me because all these different experiences were so profoundly different from mine, as they should have been, because they were very personal to that person. Here's the thing. The thing that I found to be really, really profound was that the people that I met, the few people that I encountered and had these conversations with, something very, very interesting occurred in that all of these people had physical medical conditions, real medical conditions, not psychiatric conditions, not just emotional conditions and problems, but real physical medical conditions that they were being treated for, okay? And I'm not gonna say what they were because I don't want to give off the wrong impression and make you believe that going to do ayahuasca will get rid of these conditions. But what I can say to you is this. Some of these conditions, there is no current medical treatment for. And some of them have very long, horrifying, drawn out, painful deaths over time. And these people felt somewhere in their hearts, felt drawn to want to do ayahuasca. All of them told me that no one encouraged them or forced them to do it. They just felt, they felt very drawn to doing ayahuasca. Okay, great. When they told me about their experiences, and then they came back from ayahuasca after doing ayahuasca, and it varied anywhere from 1 week or 3 ceremonies. Some people stayed there in the ayahuasca center that they went to for up to 2 months, okay? And when they came back, what they all had in common was once they dealt with their demons, once they faced their shit, once they were no longer afraid to sit in that feeling of being uncomfortable, their conditions just completely dissipated. Now, I'm not going to say that one day they woke up and boom, it was gone. But what they did was that by facing their emotions, by dealing with those feelings, by dealing with their emotions, it all just disappeared. All of these so-called medical conditions that were manifesting as physical conditions were apparently, which is the only conclusion I can draw, were coming really from what was deep down inside of them. You know, it's always interesting to me when you hear about people like, for example, I'm just going to give this as a offset example. people who smoke for 50, 60 years and never get cancer, but yet someone who doesn't smoke ends up with lung cancer, you know? And there is a lot to be said that manifested physical conditions are often manifested in the way they are to show you what your inherent weakness is. Conditions usually will show where your inherent weaknesses are, number one. And number two, what manifests as the physical is not always because it's just physical. It's manifesting as physical, but many times it's what's coming from within. When you're in pain physically, sometimes by just dealing with the emotional aspect of it, all of a sudden you get up and it's like, I'm not in pain anymore. These things happen every single day. I'm not sitting here telling you you should believe that, you know, if you do ayahuasca that all your problems are going to go away, because I want to be 100% clear when I say this. Do not doubt this for a second. You think the ayahuasca ceremonies are going to be hard and emotionally and physically draining? The work doesn't even begin until you get back into the real world. So this is a true test of your resiliency, of building upon your resiliency. And I think what's also most important to understand is that these aspects of what I'm talking about are going to be very different for everyone. They're going to manifest very differently for everyone. And they're going to go, you're going to go through what you want to and what you need to go through at your own pace. You understand what I'm saying? This is not going to be, well, 6 months after I do ayahuasca, all my pain's going to dissipate. Look, it took me a year after I did my ayahuasca ceremonies to even write an article and to be able to understand everything that occurred fully and be sure of what it was that occurred. And even to this day, almost, you know, let's see, we're coming to November. We're only a few months away from 2 years to the date that I did it, okay? 2 years ago. And yet I'm still learning from what I went through in my ayahuasca center experiences. So I hope this was a little bit more of a controlled, chaotic video for you guys. And I hope that you learned some stuff from this. And I hope that this also gives you a better idea of, you know, whether or not this is something you want to experience, whether or not you want to try this, whether or not this is right for you or not. Because remember, if you put aside the fact that you're in the middle of the jungle, if you put aside the fact that you're doing powerful plant medicines, the reality of what you have to ask yourself is, am I willing to face what I need to face? Because the ayahuasca is nothing more than a catalyst in this situation. It's the teacher and the catalyst to get you to learn lessons. Okay? I hope this was helpful, and please feel free to leave comments below. Thanks so much. Bye.